her momentum. And we've got some new data today from Syracuse University and Ipsos that you're seeing first right here on Spectrum News. Joining me now is Margaret Tullive, director of Syracuse University's Institute for Democracy, Journalism, and Citizenship, which conducts the poll with Ipsos. Margaret, thank you so much for being with us today. Now, there have been some big moments in this presidential campaign. Let's talk about some of those numbers. 24% said they were more likely to vote for Donald Trump because of the July assassination attempt. And 14% said they were more likely to vote for Kamala Harris. What do you make of the Harris support because of the shooting?
The real story behind these numbers is about party ID. Which party do you identify with? And we saw here in these results that more than half of Republicans, but only 5% of Democrats are saying that the shooting would make them more likely to back former President Trump. And then on the flip side, 1 in 3 Democrats, but just 3% of Republicans are saying that they are more likely to back Vice President Harris. So there's not really any movement across party lines. When you look at independents, they're really divided about whether the shooting would sway them in one direction or the other, but a slight edge. More independents said they were likely to move a little bit towards former President Trump after the shooting.
Interesting. Of course, another big moment so far has been when President Joe Biden dropped out of the race and Vice President Kamala Harris went up to the top of the ticket. Now, 29% said that they were more likely to vote for Trump because of that. 31% said they were more likely to vote for Harris. Before Biden dropped out, there was talk about how Harris was not likable. Does that still appear to be the case, at least with some voters?
Robert, I'll tell you that the survey didn't specifically ask respondents whether they consider any of the candidates likable, but it does show on balance that Vice President Harris's selection after President Biden dropped out did give the Democrats a boost. So that suggests that there's a lot of support for her, a lot of folks who like her, who say she's likable, at least inside the Democratic Party, but also among independents. For every 2 independents who said they were more likely to support former President Trump after Biden dropped out, 3 actually said that they were more likely to move towards Vice President Harris. So it may mean that they find Vice President Harris likable. It also might just mean that they really didn't like President Biden as a candidate, and they're happier that they have her as a choice.
Margaret, there's often the question about whether the running mate choices have an impact on the election. We've heard a lot about the running mates in recent weeks. Let's take a look at some of those numbers right now. So 25% said they agreed that Trump's odds of winning improved with Senator J.D. Vance as his running mate. 41% disagree. And with Harris choosing Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, 36% said they agree that her odds of winning improved with him on the ticket. 31% did not. So what does this say about vice presidential picks?
Yeah, it really says that these poll respondents are saying that they think that Governor Walz will help Vice President Harris on the ticket more than they think that Senator Vance will help former President Trump. They're not necessarily saying, I like Tim Walz more than I like J.D. Vance. Again, those tend to be really partisan responses, but they're saying that from a strategic perspective, in terms of who is going to help the respective tickets, they think that Tim Walz is a bigger boost for the Harris ticket than J.D. Vance is for Donald Trump's chances.
Let's move now to the debates. Of course, the first debate is what likely led to President Biden stepping down as a candidate. Right now, there is one presidential debate confirmed between Donald Trump and Vice President Harris on September 10th. And voters believe it should happen. 78% believe it's important. 20% say it's not. Before this year, not having a debate, I don't think was not even a thought. Now, what do you say about this?
Yeah, it's really interesting. It certainly validates and it probably explains former President Trump's decision, in fact, to go ahead with the second debate, that there are so many Republicans who think not only that he has to, but that he should. And I think I just really am curious what the results would have been if this were still a Biden versus Trump contest. But I think Republicans are bullish that Trump can defeat Harris. Democrats really want the chance to get back out there and relitigate this. The stakes are very high, but not going forward with the debate really wasn't an option, is what these results show us.
Really interesting stuff. And as we know, polls change, and we will continue to check in with you throughout the rest of this election. Margaret Talleb, director of Syracuse University's Institute for Democracy, Journalism, and Citizenship, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Coming up, we speak to a team of doctors working to lower cancer diagnoses and raise hope through the power of AI.
Spectrum News Plus, news from a new perspective, dedicated to refreshing storytelling and empowering communities across the nation. With balanced reporting, providing real context and in-depth coverage 24 hours a day.
Here's a look at your forecast across the country.
Local stories, connecting communities. We are Spectrum News Plus. Streaming now on the Spectrum News app and free with your Spectrum subscription.
Give me one good reason why I shouldn't switch to Spectrum Enterprise.
Well, you said our services meet some of your technology needs.
But not all.
Well, maybe you have too many.
Demand better. And when they call you unreasonable, call us.
Look, I'm switching to Spectrum Enterprise because they'll be a true partner, and I can't run this network without one.
I think you can.
Our clients do it all the time.
Demand better. And when they call you unreasonable, call us.
I don't remember how it started.
Go to that.
Our back and forth. It always came back.
Dad!
You probably don't remember what you told me,
That was perfect.
but I heard every word.
Hey, Bobo, do trees tell each other stories?
I'm sorry. I'm afraid I don't know that.
Hey, why don't we go find out? Listen.
Do clouds take naps?
I couldn't tell you.
Dad, do stars visit their friends?
Look!
Good Friday afternoon, everybody. I'm meteorologist Ramel Carpenter. We're still watching Hurricane Ernesto, now a Category 2 hurricane approaching the island of Bermuda. This isn't going to be bringing any direct impacts, though, to the United States, so that is some good news. But if you are heading up to the East Coast, any of the beaches along the East Coast, we're going to be dealing with rough surf and some dangerous rip currents because of Hurricane Ernesto. So keep that in mind if you're heading out there this weekend. The system is going to continue to approach the island of Bermuda and perhaps bringing those significant impacts later tonight into Saturday morning. We're talking storm surge, strong winds, and some heavy rainfall that could lead to some significant flooding all across the island. Hurricane warnings are in place as well, and this system is going to continue to weaken as it moves north of Bermuda into some cooler ocean temperatures and perhaps brushing the far eastern portions of Canada as a post-tropical cyclone early next week. But as far as rainfall totals go for the island of Bermuda, rainfall totals will be anywhere between 8 to 12 inches locally, which is definitely going to lead to some flooding along with that storm surge threat as well. Back here at home, we are dealing with more heat and humidity, especially across the south through Louisiana, Oklahoma, Arkansas, down towards Mississippi, and portions of western Tennessee, all under excessive heat warnings throughout the day today. Elsewhere, the areas in orange are under heat advisories as heat index values climb well above 110 degrees in a few of those locations. High temperatures, though. We're going to be in the low 90s in Kansas City today, 95 in Denver, upper 90s approaching the triple digits across the southwest. And our temperatures, unfortunately, going to stay pretty toasty across Texas. So make sure you're finding ways to stay cool as we head into this upcoming weekend. Not expecting much relief from the heat as we get into the day on Saturday. However, up north, we're going to be a little unsettled this weekend with clouds and a few showers, keeping our temperatures a few degrees below the average. in the upper 70s and the lower 80s. But when you factor in the dew points in the 70s, this is what it's going to feel like as we get into Saturday afternoon. 111 in Oklahoma City, 111 in Shreveport as well, 108 in Little Rock, and those temperatures are going to continue as we head into the day on Sunday. So really not expecting much relief from that as we get into Saturday and Sunday. So can't stress this enough. Make sure you're drinking plenty of water and fluids if you're going to be outside for an extended period of time. Where you shouldn't be outside for an extended period of time is going to be up north, where we're still dealing with that Canadian wildfire smoke pushing into the northeast. Places like Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, up towards Massachusetts, dealing with some poor air quality the last couple of days. And that continues once again for Vermont, New Hampshire, and the far western half of Massachusetts.
The American Cancer Society estimates more than 150,000 people in the U.S. will be diagnosed with colorectal cancer this year. But doctors in California are using AI to get that number down. Spectrum's Jas King has their story.
He had metastatic disease in his liver previously.
He's using AI to help him save lives.
I think AI is definitely going to be the way of the future.
Dr. Kurt Malmstrom is an associate professor of surgery at City of Hope. The hospital uses AI to come up with the level of risk a patient faces following colorectal surgery.
They then can weigh their options along with us, and we can come with alternatives if we feel the surgery is too high risk for them to tolerate based off of this score.
According to the National Institute of Health, up to 35% of colorectal surgery patients get sick or have complications after the operation, and mortality rates are as high as just over 16%. Dr. Malmstrom uses the AI to let patients know the likelihood that they'll have an issue.
You can see he's got a 39% chance of having complications. It also tells the factors that contribute to that score. His score actually goes down or gets better because he has a normal white blood cell count and has normal neutrophils. But it's worse because he has an abnormal total number of lab tests and that his PTT, or coagulation, has been elevated in the last 30 days.
Chen, have you compared the performance of the AI model?
Naseem Eftihadi is the Executive Director of Applied AI and Data Science at City of Hope. She regularly meets with her team to discuss the technology and says the AI helps doctors by providing data that's specific to individual patients.
Based on the
Hello, I'm Robert Guadarrama. You're watching Decision 2024 coverage here on Spectrum News. It is 2:26 in Raleigh, North Carolina right now. Vice President Kamala Harris is there to unveil her economic policy. This is her first major policy speech since becoming the Democratic presidential nominee. Let's take you there live.
So Mike D's Barbecue, let me tell you one of the biggest fans of Mike D's Barbecue. My husband dug him off. And thank you, Mike, for sharing your story. And I'm just so sorry for what your family has been through. But you have, out of an incredible tragedy, done so much for the community, and you are such a role model. So thank you, Mike, for everything you do. Thank you. And good afternoon to everyone here. Thank you to all of the incredible leaders with us today, including my friend, the Governor, Roy Cooper. Where is he? Here with his daughter. Every time I land in North Carolina, I'm just literally coming down the stairs of Air Force Two, I will shout to Roy Cooper, "What number is it, Roy?" And today he shouted 16, which is the number of times I've been in this beautiful state since I've been vice president. Every time. I want to thank your next governor, Attorney General Josh Stein. He's doing incredible work. He's going to be an extraordinary governor. Representatives Adam, Manning, Foushee, and Nickel, thank you all for your support, for your friendship, for your leadership. Chair Thomas of the Wake County Board of Commissioners, thank you for all that you do. And to all the leaders that are here today, including the students and instructors here at Wake Tech North. So thank you all. So listen, this election, I do strongly believe, is about two very different visions for our nation. One, ours, focused on the future, and the other focused on the past. We see that contrast clearly in many ways, including when it comes to how we think about the economy. So our country has come a long way since President Biden and I took office. At that time, we sadly remember the millions of Americans that were out of work. We were facing one of the worst economic crises in modern history. And today, by virtually every measure, our economy is the strongest in the world. We have created 16 million new jobs. We have made historic investments in infrastructure, in chips manufacturing, in clean energy. And new numbers this week alone show that inflation is down under 3%. And as President of the United States, it will be my intention to build on the foundation of this progress. Still, we know that many Americans don't yet feel that progress in their daily lives. Costs are still too high. And on a deeper level, for too many people, no matter how much they work, it feels so hard to just be able to get ahead. As president, I will be laser focused on creating opportunities for the middle class that advance their economic security, stability, and dignity. Together, we will build what I call an opportunity economy. An opportunity economy. An economy where everyone can compete and have a real chance to succeed. Everyone, regardless of who they are or where they start, has an opportunity to build wealth for themselves and their children. And where we remove the barriers to opportunity so anyone who wants to start a business or advance their career can access the tools and the resources that are necessary to do so. I will focus on cutting needless bureaucracy and unnecessary regulatory red tape and encouraging innovative technologies while protecting consumers and creating a stable business environment with consistent and transparent rules of the road. As president, I will bring together labor with small businesses and major companies to invest in America, to create good jobs, achieve broad-based growth, and ensure that America continues to define the future and lead the world. And key to creating this opportunity economy is building up our middle class. It is essential. The middle class is one of America's greatest strengths. And to protect it, then, we must defend basic principles, such as your salary should be enough to provide you and your family with a good quality of life. Such as no child should have to grow up in poverty. Such as after years of hard work, you should be able to retire with dignity. And you should be able to join a union if you choose. Building up the middle class will be a defining goal of my presidency, because I strongly believe when the middle class is strong, America is strong. So in the weeks to come, I will address in greater detail my plans to build an opportunity economy. And today, I will focus on one element that's on the minds of many Americans as they pay their bills at the kitchen table or walk the aisles of a grocery store. And that is lowering the cost of living. So every day across our nation, families talk about their plans for the future, their ambitions, their aspirations for themselves, for their children. And they talk about how they're going to be able to actually achieve them financially. Because look, the bills add up. Food, rent, gas, back to school clothes, prescription medication. After all that, for many families, there's not much left at the end of the month. I grew up in a middle-class household. For most of my childhood, we were renters. My mother saved for well over a decade to buy a home. I was a teenager when that day finally came, and I can remember so well how excited she was. I kind of understood what it meant, but we called her Mommy. Mommy was so excited, it just made us excited that she was so excited. Later in college, I worked at McDonald's to earn spending money. Well, some of the people I worked with were raising families on that paycheck. They worked second or even third jobs to pay rent and buy food. That only gets harder when the cost of living goes up. When I am elected president, I will make it a top priority to bring down costs and increase economic security for all Americans. As president, I will take on the high costs that matter most to most Americans, like the cost of food. We all know that prices went up during the pandemic when the supply chains shut down and failed. But our supply chains have now improved, and prices are still too high. A loaf of bread costs 50% more today than it did before the pandemic. Ground beef is up almost 50%. Many of the big food companies are seeing their highest profits in 2 decades. And while many grocery chains pass along these savings, others still aren't. Look, I know most businesses are creating jobs, contributing to our economy, and playing by the rules. But some are not. And that's just not right. And we need to take action when that is the case. As Attorney General in California, I went after companies that illegally increased prices, including wholesalers that inflated the price of prescription medication, and companies that conspired with competitors to keep prices of electronics high. I won more than $1 billion for consumers. So believe me, as president, I will go after the bad actors. And I will work to pass the first ever federal ban on price gauging on food. My plan will include new penalties for opportunistic companies that exploit crises and break the rules, and we will support smaller food businesses that are trying to play by the rules and get ahead. We will help the food industry become more competitive, because I believe competition is the lifeblood of our economy. More competition means lower prices for you and your families. Now compare what Donald Trump plans to do. He wants to impose what is, in effect, a national sales tax on everyday products and basic necessities that we import from other countries. That will devastate Americans. It will mean higher prices on just about every one of your daily needs. A Trump tax on gas, a Trump tax on food, a Trump tax on clothing, a Trump tax on over-the-counter medication. And you know, economists have done the math. Donald Trump's plan would cost a typical family $3,900 a year. At this moment, when everyday prices are too high, he will make them even higher. As president, I'll take on the issue of the cost of health care. As Attorney General, I took on insurance companies and Big Pharma and got them to lower their prices. And together with President Biden, we've gone even further. We capped the price of insulin at $35 a month, and the total cost of prescription drugs at $2,000 a year for seniors. We let Medicare negotiate lower drug prices for seniors. And just yesterday, we announced that we are lowering the price by up to 80% for 10 more life-saving drugs. And I pledge to continue this progress. I'll lower the cost of insulin and prescription drugs for everyone with your support, not only our seniors. And demand transparency from the middlemen who operate between Big Pharma and the insurance companies who use opaque practices to raise your drug prices and profit off your need for medicine. 2 months ago, I announced that medical debt will no longer be used against your credit score. And I will work as president with states like here in North Carolina, Roy Cooper, thank you again, to cancel medical debt for more and more, millions more Americans. As for Donald Trump, well, he wants to repeal the Affordable Care Act, which 45 million Americans rely on. 45 million Americans rely on it for health care. That would take us back to a time when insurance companies could deny people with pre-existing conditions. We all remember what that was. And we're not going back. We're not going back. We're not going back. And remember, and this is why we're not going back, because we do remember, he tried to cut Medicare every year he was president, threatening a program that tens of millions of seniors count on. And according to his Project 2025 agenda, he intends to undo our work to bring down prescription drugs, the cost of prescription drugs, and insulin costs. Well, we've come too far to let that happen. So we're not going back on that, and let's talk about the cost of housing. So now, the housing market can be complicated, but look, I'm not new to this issue. As State Attorney General, I drafted and helped pass a homeowner Bill of Rights, one of the first in America. And during the foreclosure crisis, I took on the big banks for predatory lending with many of my colleagues, including Roy Cooper, and won $20 billion for California families when I was Attorney General. So I know how to fight for people who are being exploited in the housing market. And I know what home ownership means. It's more than a financial transaction. It's so much more than that. It's more than a house. Home ownership and what that means, it's a symbol of the pride that comes with hard work. It's financial security. It represents what you will be able to do for your children. And sadly, right now, it is out of reach for far too many American families. There's a serious housing shortage. In many places, it's too difficult to build, and it's driving prices up. As president, I will work in partnership with industry to build the housing we need, both to rent and to buy. We will take down barriers and cut red tape, including at the state and local levels. And by the end of my first term, we will end America's housing shortage by building 3 million new homes and rentals that are affordable for the middle class. And we will do that together. We will do that together. And we will make sure those homes actually go to working and middle-class Americans, not just investors. Because, you know, some corporate landlords, some of them buy dozens, if not hundreds, of houses and apartments. Then they turn them around and rent them out at extremely high prices. And it can make it impossible then for regular people to be able to buy or even rent a home. Some corporate landlords collude with each other to set artificially high rental prices, often using algorithms in price-fixing software to do it. It's anti-competitive and it drives up costs. I will fight for a law that cracks down on these practices. We also know that as the price of housing has gone up, the size of down payments have gone up as well. Even if aspiring homeowners save for years, it often still is not enough. So in addition, while we work on the housing shortage, my administration will provide first-time home buyers with $25,000 to help with the down payment on a new home. We can do this. We can do this. All to help more Americans experience the pride of home ownership and the financial security that it represents and brings. So that's my plan. But here's what Donald Trump would do. If his Project 2025 agenda is put into effect, it will add around $1,200 a year to the typical American mortgage. He's got it backward. We should be doing everything we can to make it more affordable to buy a home, not less. Finally, there's one more way I will help families deal with rising costs, and that's by letting you keep more of your hard-earned money. Under my plan, more than 100 million Americans will get a tax cut, and we will do this by restoring 2 tax cuts designed to help middle-class and working Americans: the Earned Income Tax Credit and the Child Tax Credit. Through which millions of Americans with children got to keep more of their hard-earned income. We know this works and has a direct impact on so many issues, including child poverty. We know it works. So as president, I'll not only restore that tax cut, but expand it. We will provide $6,000 in tax relief to families during the first year of a child's life. Now think what that means. Think what that means. That is a vital, vital year of critical development of a child. And the cost can really add up, especially for young parents who need to buy diapers and clothes and a car seat and so much else. And we will do this while reducing the deficit. Compare my plan with what Donald Trump intends to do. He plans to give billionaires massive tax cuts year after year. And he plans to cut corporate taxes by over $1 trillion, even as they pull in record profits. And that's on top of the $2 trillion tax cut he already signed into law when he was president, which, by the way, overwhelmingly went to the wealthiest Americans and corporations and exploded the national deficit. You know, I think that if you want to know who someone cares about, look who they fight for. Look who they fight for. Donald Trump fights for billionaires and large corporations. I will fight to give money back to working and middle-class Americans. So I'll end with this. 2 days ago, Donald Trump was here in North Carolina. He said he was going to talk about the economy. I think you all watched. You know what I'm about to say. But he offered no serious plans to reduce costs for middle-class families. No plan to expand access to housing or health care. And that, actually, I think for most of us, was not surprising. Because we already know his plans. We know the Project 2025 agenda. So there's a choice in this election. Donald Trump's plans to devastate the middle class, punish working people, and make the cost of living go up for millions of Americans. And on the other hand, when I'm elected president, what we will do to bring down costs, increase the security and stability financially of your family, and expand opportunity for working and middle-class Americans. So now is the time to chart a new way forward. Now is the time to chart a new way forward, to build a new way forward. Yes, a new way forward. To build an America where everyone's work is rewarded and talents are valued, where we work with labor and business to strengthen the American economy, and where everyone has the opportunity not just to get by, but to get ahead. So I thank you, North Carolina. We're going to get this done. And with your help, God bless you, and God bless the United States of America. God bless you.
You just heard Vice President Kamala Harris outline her economic policy. Harris opening by saying our economy is the strongest in the world by every measure, but she understands the American people may not feel that at this time. Take a look at her plan. It calls for tax cuts for lower and middle class Americans, also to expand the child tax credit. She wants to add 3 million new housing units in her first 4 years of office to help with the affordable housing crisis. And she announced a federal plan to address price gouging. Harris says these plus other initiatives will create what she's calling an opportunity economy. Joining me now to talk more about the vice president's plans and the campaign ahead, Washington, D.C. reporter Cassie Simeon. She's covering the Harris campaign for Spectrum News. And political anchor Tim Boyum, who knows all things North Carolina. Thanks for being with me today. Cassie, let me start with you. Let's talk about the policy, especially the child tax credit. Now, this is policy Harris hopes to enact on day one. You also have new reporting about a few of the other initiatives.
Yeah, so let's start with that child tax credit. This is something that Democrats have really been laying the groundwork for over the last several years, specifically in the minority in the House of Representatives. Congressman Jimmy Gomez, who represents part of Los Angeles, he worked with Harris at the state level. He is a campaign surrogate for Harris, and he has been working over the last 2 years through the Dad's Caucus, which he established, to make sure that they are continuing to build that groundwork. And he's told me time and time again that when Democrats win the House, they keep the Senate, when they keep the White House, they will be working to expand the child tax credit on day one. We are seeing that now reflected in Harris's policy priorities. We're also learning from Congressman Jimmy Gomez that he is actually going to sponsor that bill that Harris was talking about building those 3 million new housing units to try and tackle the affordable housing crisis that this country is in right now. He said he wants to make sure, as the chair of the Renters Caucus as well, that affordable housing and buying a home is something that Americans can do without going broke. And that's a real problem in this country. He said he's talked to many of his constituents who are struggling to buy their first home because they simply can't afford it with mortgage rates so high. So that is going to be a key priority. And it really shows that Harris is taking voices from Congress when she's looking at these policy priorities and how she's introducing them. One thing that did stand out to me was she only went through a couple of these announcements today, Robert. She said over the next several days and weeks, we'll get to hear more of these policy priorities. But this was the first time in her presidential campaign so far that we've actually seen hardcore policy priorities unveiled by the vice president. And she didn't shy away from President Biden either, mentioning the fact that the Inflation Reduction Act was signed into law 2 years ago and that they were able to lower the prescription drug costs, which we saw them celebrate yesterday. And she said that's going to be another key priority on day one if she's elected president in November.
Right. And I'm looking right now at the full policy, and it really focuses on middle, lower income Americans as well as small businesses. Cassie, can we expect to see more policy speeches like this one in the near future? Many voters know the vice president, of course, from the Biden administration, and those economic policies aren't the most popular with some Americans.
Well, here's the thing. The economy is in a really good place right now. And she did acknowledge, that it is, even though you're not feeling it, and she understands that there's a pinch on Americans' wallets. It kind of was reminiscent of Bill Clinton and saying, I feel your pain. This is something she reminded people. I started working at McDonald's when I was in college. I understand what it's like to work hard. I saw people struggling to live on a McDonald's paycheck, raise a family. I was just doing it as a college kid. So she's trying to really connect with middle class Americans and say, hey, I understand that you're still feeling inflation. I'm going to make it a priority to address it, not not just in this campaign, but if you elect me president, I'm not someone that's going to be fighting for the wealthy. I'm going to look at expanding the middle class, which is a continuation, really, of what the Biden administration has really tried to do over the last 3.5 years. So I do think that we will see attempts by the Harris campaign to really connect with those middle class Americans. You know, today she's speaking at a community college. She spoke yesterday at a community college. College education is incredibly expensive in this country, and that's also an issue that the Biden-Harris administration has tried to tackle when it comes to student loan forgiveness over the last several years. So I think we're going to continue to see that connection. There was a line that really seemed to rile up the crowd at one point when she said, you know, when you want to know who people are fighting for, you know, who they care about, look at who they're fighting for, and took a swing really at Trump, saying he's only looking out for the wealthy like him, people who have college educations, people who are business owners, who, you know, are millionaires and billionaires. And she's saying, hey, I understand your pain. I know what it's like, and I'm going to fight for you on day one. And that's the difference between our campaign and the Trump campaign.
Right. And Tim, speaking of those jabs that Harris took at Trump and the Trump campaign, there were several points she brought up that the Trump tax, what she's calling Trump's economic policy, that it could cost American families about $3,900 a year. She also attacked Trump over Medicare. Were you surprised to see those points in an economic policy speech?
No, and you know, what's interesting is I think that whole Trump tax is something, you know, campaigns are about people remembering things, and I don't think people are going to remember this long list of things that she's going to put out over the next few weeks. Some of them are, you know, it's not to downplay how important some of them may or may not be, but people remember things like bumper stickers, right? And so this Trump tax is something that might stick. Just real quick though, back to the point where you guys were just talking about how, you know, she's trying to resonate to these folks. She's been to North Carolina 8 times this year, but almost every single time it's been Charlotte or Raleigh. She's going to win those places largely. The state party chair in North Carolina, Democratic Party, she's from rural North Carolina. She wants to see Kamala Harris go to, say, eastern North Carolina, where it's a little bit more rural and where the economy is not doing as well as growing areas like Raleigh and Charlotte. And so I think it's an interesting point about her trying to resonate with those folks. If she could go to farmers markets and places like that, I think that'd be a real boost to her campaign and pushing some of these things moving forward. And one other point, we really need to start paying attention to congressional races too, because what we've seen from proposals as vague as they were with Donald Trump and what Kamala Harris has done today and she's going to do in the coming weeks, they almost all need congressional approval. And so those races are going to be just as important as the presidential race if any of this is actually going to, you know, pass and become law and impact the American people.
Right. A president's policy is only as good as their support in Congress. Tim, the Cook Political Report found Harris statistically tied with Trump in North Carolina. Are Democrats in the state feeling optimistic that they could possibly win the state again? This is something that hasn't been done since Barack Obama back in 2008.
Well, and before Barack Obama in 2008, it was Jimmy Carter in 1976. Those are the only 2 times in sort of modern history here. They do feel that way right now. I would caution it's sort of a honeymoon period. I think Governor Cooper said before Kamala Harris said got on stage that it feels like 2008 again. There is an optimism, but the truth is that it still leans just a tiny bit towards Republicans in this state. So Democrats need to turn this enthusiasm into door knocking and making sure that people vote in November. And so while it was always going to be close, Donald Trump only won by 74,000 votes in 2020. It's a matter of putting that into action, and can they do that over the next several months, or will Donald Trump squeak out a victory in North Carolina again? But I do think it's definitely more within reach than anybody would have thought earlier this year.
Sure. Tim, let's talk about Donald Trump. He was in Asheville 2 days ago. It's a blue city and a sea of red. He was there to speak about the economy. How are Republicans in North Carolina feeling about the race right now with all this momentum on Harris's side? Do they feel that the current economic conditions will help them in November?
Well, I think they wish that President Trump, former president, would stick to economic issues and stick to immigration instead of talking about these personal attacks and going after Kamala Harris's race and all of the other lines of attack that he's gone after. I think there's a sense of nervousness that was clearly not there a month, 6 weeks ago from Republicans. I still think they think fundamentally that they can win this, but they do want to hone in and focus on those issues, these grocery, dinner table issues that are impacting Americans. They still believe if they stick to that, they can win. But where this is headed, they are more nervous than ever, for sure.
Cassie, let me ask you about next week, kind of looking forward. The Democratic National Convention begins on Monday in Chicago, but Harris and her running mate, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, are hitting the campaign trail before that this weekend, a very busy weekend in some key battleground states, including a bus tour. What are those campaign plans?
Yeah, Governor Tim Walz is going to Nebraska, his home state where he was born and raised before he and his wife Gwen moved to Minnesota. So that is going to be a homecoming of sorts for him to rally up support for their campaign. They're going to kick off this bus tour in Pennsylvania, a critical battleground swing state for this campaign. It handed Biden and Harris the White House in 2020. It will be critical again to whoever wins the White House, whether that be Harris or Trump. That will be in Pittsburgh, and it will be the first time that we will see both Harris, Walz, Emhoff, Doug Emhoff being, of course, Harris's husband, and Gwen Walz, Tim Walz's wife. They're going to be doing this trip together, and this is the first time we're going to see them since that announcement last week that Walz was joining the ticket. So it'll be interesting to kind of see what those dynamics are like. You know, Harris and Emhoff are really warm people on the campaign trail. There's a lot of affection between the two of them. It'll be interesting to see those dynamics between the two couples as they're trying to rally support. Then from there, they're going to head to Wisconsin on Tuesday. They're going to rally in Milwaukee, which of course was the city that hosted the RNC last month, on Tuesday. So on the second day of the DNC, they'll be just over the border in the neighboring state of Wisconsin, rallying support there, another critical battleground state for this ticket that they feel confident with the addition of Walz on the ticket that it could be in play for them in November. And then, of course, Walz will accept the nomination as vice president on Wednesday night, Harris on Thursday, and we will get to see both of them speak in prime time to accept their party's nomination.
A big week ahead indeed. Cassie, there have been calls for Harris to hold a news conference or just answer reporter questions. Do we expect that will happen anytime soon as she's on the campaign trail?
I think this period of time is really focused in on honing the messaging and doing it on their terms. We have to remember the fact that Harris was really thrown into this and became the party's nominee less than 4 weeks ago. So right now, her team is really trying to hone their messaging, decide how they are going to be presenting their policies like we saw in this speech and like we will continue to see over the next several weeks. I don't expect her to give a major interview until after the DNC, after she claims the nomination and gives that primetime address, because it's not the press that she needs to convince that she is the nominee or that she is the correct choice. It's the American public. And right now they feel this is the best way to connect with the voters, maybe who aren't sure whether or not they should be voting Democrat or Republican come November and are trying to weigh their options. So she is out on the campaign trail. They're sending Tim Walz out on the campaign trail to these critical battleground states over these next several weeks to try and shore up that support, to talk directly to the American people. Messages like this, that I feel your pain, I see you, I understand what you are going through, and I'm going to fight for you if you elect me as president. That is what the campaign is seeing as the messaging that is working. That's why they're honing in so much on social media. So I don't really expect, Robert, that we'll get a press conference or a major network interview from Harris until maybe after Labor Day.
Sure. But Tim, it is a valid criticism, you know, and it is mainly on the right that we're hearing the criticism that she's not as transparent, she's not as available to the media.